Hi, in this presentation I talk about boosting sales with ISO 9001. It's part of a presentation that I made to the New Zealand Organisation for Quality, the Central Branch, on the 22nd of April 2015. This is a slightly longer session because of time restrictions I had during the session. It prevented me from presenting some material, so I can cover it in a little more detail here. Hi, I'm Michael Voss. In 1999, I started PYXIS.co.nz to help small to medium businesses to grow. I consult and provide a wee bit of training. A lot of the work that I do is helping businesses to integrate their health and safety systems with their quality management systems, and also work with other standards like food safety and the environmental management, ISO 14001 and so on. I've also worked with the criteria for performance excellence for more than 20 years, and I've assessed hundreds of organisations throughout New Zealand and trained assessors both in New Zealand and overseas. So I really do know what a sustainable business looks like. I help business owners to avoid the pitfalls and mistakes in business and help them to set up for high growth and ongoing success. This is a sample of the organisations I've worked with. Industry types really cover lots of sectors: health, education, local and central government, manufacturing, aviation, oil and gas, chemical processing, wood processing, construction, and a lot of service-based businesses. And the size is really very large range, from small business with just 4 or 5 staff to quite large organisations. So that's probably enough on me. Now to today's topic. There is no question about it that ISO has transformed our lives today. Most of us wouldn't even be aware that ISO standards have had such an impact. We've only got to look at aviation, for example. We're actually more likely to be harmed by crossing the street than actually taking a commercial flight today. Motor vehicles are another one we just take for granted. You know, we get in our cars, we drive off down wherever it is that we need to go. And I certainly take for granted that my 20-year-old Honda, when it breaks down, it can be fixed within 24 hours by my local garage. And that's quite extraordinary when you start to think about it. But we actually take it for granted. Similarly, medical devices. We're all getting older, and when things break down in our bodies, we take it for granted that that new hip or knee or heart valve will not harm us, and it will extend the quality of our lives. Food. We feel confident that the food we buy from the supermarket is actually safe for us to eat. These are all examples of things that are driven by industry supply chains that rely on critical activities to be controlled and managed using ISO standards such as ISO 9001 and 14001, along with many others. This is a slide which I've shown for many years in a lot of the training and a lot of the presentations that I actually make. And I've often thought about whether there was any more recent research that would actually point to the fact or making some connection between the ISO standards and increased sales. So let's look at ISO 9000 and financial performance. Just looking at the ISO 9001 standard, those of you not familiar with it, it's been around since 1987. And since 1987, it's had 3 major updates. There are in fact currently around 1.2 million organisations that are certified across 178 countries. So it truly is an international standard. It's done a huge amount to have an impact on global supply chains. Added a lot of value, as I said before, to the lives that we lead today. There's a new revision of the standard that's due out in September 2015, so it's not too far away. If we look at financial results, things like return on assets, return on sales, return on investment, profit margins, profitability, sales and market share, what we're really wanting to see is there some sort of a connection between these two? In 2011, the Rotterdam School of Management conducted a meta-study of 42 separate studies on the subject. they found there were two distinct groupings. One grouping was associated with organisations that were driven by external motivation. So in other words, they required ISO 9000 certification to do business. Then there was a second group of organisations, and those were more internally motivated. So they had internal business reasons why they wanted to get ISO 9000 and why they wanted to embrace the requirements within the standard. Let's just look at certification for a start. Those people who were externally motivated. Okay, so what those people are wanting to do is they get certification. So they found that as a result of certification, what followed was that there was a signalling benefit that was immediately accrued on the organisation. It gave them access to new markets, they had increased market share, increased sales as a direct result of going out there and get certification. So they had now joined one of the 1.2 million organisations worldwide that are certified to this. It signals their preparedness to step up into the same sort of sphere of operation of these other organisations. As a consequence, their costs reduced, and of course that has an impact on financial performance. Now let's look at those organisations that were internally motivated to embrace ISO 9000. They found that the implementation of the requirements around ISO 9001 led to significant internal benefits. No great surprise here because they were internally motivated. What they found was improvements in control of processes. They found that product quality improved. They found that productivity increased, and they found that efficiency was significantly increased. That in turn drove down costs. So the costs of delivering those products and services were reduced as a direct result of those internal benefits. They also found that those internal benefits led to external benefits. It also gave them access to new markets. It also increased market share and increased sales. But the external benefits were as a result of the internal benefits having been accrued earlier. The external benefits led to increase in income, which of course, both of which have an impact on financial performance. So when we put the two together, we can see that while those externally motivated for certification, while they improved their financial benefits, largely due to lower costs, it gave them improvements in financial performance. But by far greater increase in financial performance was as a result of those organisations that were internally motivated. Because not only did they have lower costs, they also had higher incomes. However, no matter what motivates an organisation, there are financial benefits through using the requirements that are in the ISO 9001 standard. But by far the greatest ones are from those organisations that are truly believe for internal reasons they will gain most benefit. Let's talk a little bit more about the management system, and particularly the quality management system and the ISO 9001 standard. This is what I call a pyramid management system. In the past, ISO 9000 has required an organisation to have a quality manual that contains the quality management system. Most times people have a policy at the very top, which is indicated at the top of the pyramid, and this policy will be organisation wide. We then step down and we see operating procedures, sometimes called standard operating procedures or SOPs within organisations, and these will typically cover different departments within a complex organisation. Then we step down from departments down to areas or assets or projects, depending on the nature of the organisation and what they're trying to manage and control. And there may be standard operating procedures, work instructions, machine and special equipment instructions down at this lower level. Some organisations will also put another layer underneath this, which is for records. The reason why I showed as a pyramid is because at the very top we might just have one policy or very few policy documents. As we step down, will probably get a 10 times or even 100 times increase in the number of documents. So by the time we get down to the bottom, we've got hundreds, maybe thousands, maybe 10,000 documents down at this level. And of course, records, you can expect those to be much, much greater. So that's why we indicate this as a pyramid. So there are lots of documents associated with management systems. And I think what's happened over the years is so much of this documentation has meant that people have thought that the manual, the quality manual, or the health and safety manual was actually the management system. And they got so bogged down in documents rather than running the business in an efficient and effective way. So most organisations are actually overwhelmed with documents. That's the policies and procedures, work instructions, records. This all changes in the 2015 revision of ISO 9000. You don't actually have to have a quality manual anymore. We still need to meet the ISO 9001 requirements, but you do not have to use a manual to do it. So what we're saying is there still needs to be sufficient records generated as you run your business processes to provide the evidence that the process is actually being followed. You still have to provide evidence for that. So where, for example, you've got an automated process that is how you manage particular activities, you don't need a manual that covers how that works or explains how all that works. You don't actually need a manual at all to do that, providing you can demonstrate that your process is under control, that it generates sufficient records so that you can actually audit the process and establish, yes, indeed, it is operating as expected. That is sufficient. There's also been a shift in mindset. You see, in the past, we've had this person called a management representative, who is the person who has the responsibility for looking after the quality management system or the environmental management system. The problem is that what has happened over the years is organisations have looked to this individual to say anything that's a quality issue becomes their problem, when in actual fact it's too big for one person. You cannot run a business where you assign all of the responsibilities for anything that goes wrong to one particular individual. Deming and others have talked about the fact that quality is everybody's work, it's everybody's responsibility. Everybody is responsible for doing whatever they possibly can to meet customers' needs and satisfy customers. So no one person can be responsible for quality. It requires instead a company-wide commitment around quality, and that includes the leadership. So this is quite a significant mindset shift that's occurring within the ISO 9000 standard. Also, there's more consideration of what is called interested parties. These are stakeholders in the organisation, customers, suppliers in the community, and so on. So what this all means is that those of us who have been responsible in the past for looking after quality management systems, environmental management systems and the like, health and safety ones as well, instead of being preoccupied by that documentation which is not up to date and doesn't reflect current practice as far as the business is concerned, we can forget a little bit about that and actually start to focus our attention much better on the business again and lose a bit of that preoccupation around the manual. Because by preoccupying ourselves with the manual, we've actually lost sight of what the business is actually all about. And this is really, really unfortunate. I'm excited by the changes that have occurred now. It's been too long that TC 176 working group have brought us out these sorts of changes. They're a step in the right direction. Let's talk about what business is about. Essentially, it's about trust. I will likely buy another Honda because this is the second one I've owned, and I've learnt to trust that it's one of the most reliable motor cars today. Despite being designed over 20 years ago, my vehicle is still one of the most fuel-efficient vehicles on the road. I've had a series of bad experiences with a telecommunications provider. I've never received a credit I was promised when they overcharged me. I've never been visited by their account manager when he said that he would. And I'm still waiting for that exchange upgrade that I was told would be installed last month to provide the broadband speeds I'm paying for, but still not getting. All I ask is that people do what they say they're going to do. We live in the country and absolutely love Mighty Ape. Mighty Ape delivers next day via our rural delivery from Auckland, so long as I get my order in before 4 p.m. the day before. Other suppliers explain that because we're on a rural delivery, it's going to take an extra 1 to 2 days to deliver. And they're mostly right. Sometimes it even takes longer. As a customer, I just want to be treated with respect. Then I'm likely to continue to do business with you. I find we often forget the basics. What's our business about? When we get bogged down in our documentation, we lose sight, we lose perspective on what the business is actually about. This is why the shop window of your business is so important. The shop window, this is what you choose to present to the world, your customers, and anyone who cares to look. Often we use terms like vision, mission, purpose, along with words, images and logos that present who we are and what we do to the world. The best way I can explain how the shop window works is through an example. Supposing you manufacture wood fires for heating homes. In your shop window you might say, we're dedicated to making the lowest emission wood fires in New Zealand. That's fine to put that out there. So how are you going to measure that? If you're going to put a statement out there, if I'm going to trust you for being able to deliver on what you're saying you've got in your shop window, then you better have some means for actually measuring the outcome. In this particular case, the toughest standards in New Zealand are actually come from the Environment Canterbury. So if you can meet or surpass the ECAN requirements, then you could truly say, yes, we are making the lowest emission wood fires in New Zealand. So you can prove it. But you better be measuring it. Similarly, when you make a statement like, we stand by our promises, and I've seen lots of organisations that do that, or say that. How are you going to measure that? A lot of organisations talk about delivery in full, on time, in specification, or DFOTIS. And most organisations out there that do that actually do measure this, and they can quote how well they deliver on their promises. If you're going to offer a 10-year guarantee, you better have some system for being able to access records at least 10 years, probably up to 12 years old. And you better be able to access those records within a period of time. And there are companies and businesses out there that specialise in records management, and they can provide you with any record within 24 hours. So that's not a difficult service to actually get. Similarly, our wood fire manufacturer is a for-profit organisation. So it has shareholders, and it would report on returns on investment to those shareholders. If you're a privately owned company, you might not want to put that in the shop window, but if you're a publicly listed company, there is a requirement to publish all sorts of information like this to shareholders. So this is in the public domain. This is the stuff that you need to present. This is what we do with our shop window. We then go and say, right, well, we've made all these statements out there to the public and anybody who cares to pay attention. So that becomes our purpose statements within our shop window. Over the right hand side we have our outcomes. These are all the measures that we use to actually prove that what we're doing in our shop window actually meets our requirements. These are our outcomes. What's in the middle are our work systems and processes. So these work systems and processes are essential to satisfy our customers and run our business, and they need to be controlled. When we comply with standards like ISO 9001, health and safety, food safety and the environment, we integrate all these requirements into our business management system. In the old days, we would have had separate health and safety system, a separate quality management system, separate environmental management system, and maybe even a separate HACCP system. This is extremely inefficient. If you still have one of these multiple systems you're managing, then you need to integrate them. Let's now dive into the work systems and processes themselves. For our wood fire manufacturer, we've got some key processes. We need to have the means to be able to take orders from customers. We need to then be able to build fires that people actually want. So we need to be able to build to order, and we need to be able to dispatch product to our customers. So these are key business processes. These are key ones to how we actually make money. They are supported by other processes which are quite important to support those basic key processes. Things like procurement. We don't build everything ourselves. We need to procure items from subcontractors. We need to manage those contractors. But also, in order to keep our fire designs to the very latest and greatest technology, which we've already said is the lowest emissions in New Zealand, we need to have research and development functioning. So those are quite key support processes. Then we've got some other business processes that are required. Things like leadership, how we plan, how we interact and interface with customers, how we manage our workforce, how we manage the other parts of the operations that we need in our business, in addition to the processes that we've already listed that are key. How do we manage institutional knowledge, the knowledge we have in the organisation on how to build fires? How do we analyse, review and improve the performance of our business? These are all important processes we have to have in our organisation. With the ISO 9000 2015 revision, there's so much more focus on customers and what they need. And also, I mentioned before, also on the needs of interested parties that we call stakeholders. That's suppliers, contractors, staff and the community. Even if you don't have to comply with the ISO 9001 standard, the standard itself provides a minimum of what your processes need to include to adequately control the delivery of the products and services to your customer. After all, your customers also experience the product and service delivery from some of those other 1.2 million companies that we know are already certified. As customers, we already know what these standards mean. When we fly overseas, we experience what it means to have ISO 9000 certification for businesses that actually meet the requirements of ISO 9001. As I mentioned before, every day I get into my Honda car, I appreciate the quality and the standards that have been met by Honda as they have built that car. And of course, when I go to the supermarket or when I sit down and eat the food that I do every day, I appreciate the systems and processes that people have got in place. A lot of people ask me, where do you get started? How do I determine which ones are the most important? And while I think I've got a lot of these processes in place, how do I work out which ones are in greatest need of actually improvement? Or which are the ones that I'm lacking? How do I find these things? This is where the maturity grid comes in. For me, this provides a helicopter view of the entire business. There's not one area of the business that's not considered by this, because this actually comes from business excellence. It's a very powerful means to look at where you are right now and what areas need to be worked on next to improve. So what we do here is we consider each particular area. Here's leadership, for example, and we just read through the statement and determine, does that sound like us from a leadership perspective? Keep reading until we read one and we say, well, we're not as good as that. That's not us. Then you want to circle here and decide, well, we score a 4 in terms of leadership. And then what you can do is you can get your score and just multiply it by the number here and enter the score in here for leadership, and just carry on going down through this. So eventually you end up completely populating this. And you'll see here, measurement analysis and knowledge management scores only a 1, so it's very, very low. We've got another one down here at operations. So there's some operational issues as far as this business is concerned. So these are two key areas which this business needs to focus on. It can forget about some of these others. Although customers only scores a 3, they've got work to do down here in measurement and also around operations. They need to get those up to speed first before they deal with some of the others. The other thing I like about this maturity grid is the fact that we can end up with a score. As I said before, we can add up all these scores and we come up to 23 for this particular organisation. That means we've got 23 out of 100 points. That provides us with a baseline. So we know that once we have carried out some improvements, we can once again go and apply the maturity grid and actually see how much we have improved since last time. And this turns out to be really, really valuable, because it's very rare that we end up with really good measures that we can use to track the results of our improvement efforts. And this is a really nice way to do this. Just to finally sum up in this talk about boosting sales. ISO standards are incredibly valuable documents, even if you choose not to become certified. It does not mean that there isn't value in the standards, and there is tremendous value. Even just reading through the standard to figure out what is it that some of these other 1.2 million organizations worldwide that have chosen to become certified, what is it that they have to have in place? And it doesn't cost you anything other than the cost of the standard to actually go through that, understand what those things are, and actually incorporate them into your own processes. Doesn't cost you anything to do that. Going for certification signals to the market that you're deadly serious about quality. And that, as we said before, will bring about some benefits to the organization. Look at your shop window. Look at how you present the business out to the world. What is it that you put in the shop window? And the places you should look is what's on your website, what's in your brochures, what goes out in the advertising material that you put out on national television or on the radio. Look at all of those sources, put it all together, make sure it's consistent, and make sure you deliver on it. Decide how you're going to measure the outcomes of the things you promise and put in your shop window. Then select the processes that you know need work on, and use the maturity grid tool to do that. What you will find is that people will develop trust in you as a reliable and efficient supplier as a result of that. And that, of course, as I said before, will enable you to boost sales. And also, it will enable you to build a sustainable business which is successful in the future. Thank you for your attention. If you email me at this address below, michael@pyxis.co.nz, I will provide for you a copy of the maturity grid, those of you who are keen to use that. You can also sign up to our newsletter at www.pyxis.co.nz for further information. You'll find some further information on our website. I hope you have found this presentation useful. Many thanks.